Hey toy fans, Aaron here. Tonight, wrapping up the look at the Retro Collection line with my look at the Stormtrooper figure. So let's head to that table and check this one out. And looking at the card first, which makes the call back to the original line. You get your Star Wars logo with the same image of the Stormtroopers that you had on that original release back in the late 70s. What makes it stand out on the store shelves as not being part of the vintage collection or confused with that original release. It's going to be your white worn edges that are printed all around the sides of the card, and that large Retro Collection sticker towards the bottom. And then of course through the blister you see the figure with the included accessory. On the back side, top half just talks about this line being inspired by the figures from the late 70s. You have your sketch artwork of the 6 figures that are available individually carded. Tarkin is, of course, not being included here for some reason. And then below that in the red box are the names of those figures that are available. Bottom half is your legal information. And now taking a look at them out of the packaging. I do not have the original figure to compare with, but I did look at images online. And for the most part, things are looking pretty darn close to the original release. All the black painting is a little bit of a stronger edge to it and not as faded out. Some of that could have been due to the age of the figure that I saw the photo of though. And also I gotta say this is a very bright white figure, but unfortunately throughout the figure, different pieces of the armor just don't match up with the rest of the colors in itself. The arms seem like maybe there's a slight yellow look to it. Certainly not as bright white of a color. And then down at the legs, you know, there's kind of like a slight pink mixed into that white. For as well as the Princess Leia figure matched up, I'm not sure why the struggle was there on this release. Aside from that, looking at the sculpting of the helmet, for some reason they made it a kind of a large puffy helmet, but they still captured all the details of how it should look. As I mentioned, the black painting is looking pretty good. Everything's staying well placed right where it should be. Through the arms, mostly white armor, but once again, everything's looking correct. There's some nice black lines painted in right above the elbow or through that area, which I gotta say is a touch surprising how well they're nailing the painting for this retro collection when, for the basic assortment for Force Awakens, Rogue One, and really the last few years, paint application has been pretty questionable. Moving on though, on the back of the hands, this is where the white certainly doesn't match up. Maybe it's because of that black underneath, but it certainly looks like more of a dirty white. Otherwise, sculpting for the chest is looking fantastic. You get a fair amount of detailing, especially through the midsection, through the stomach. And then on the back side, you still have what you expect to see for a Stormtrooper with the detailing on the upper back. You have that canister sculpted in right around his waist. And then for the legs, the armor is looking very appropriate for what it should be like. Touch of black painting right at the top of the legs through the hip, and a little bit more right around the kneecaps. On the back of his right leg, or that upper thigh, that's where you're going to find your modern date stamp there. That was not done on the original figure. It was part of the mold, but for this, it's printed on. As for articulation, due to the way the helmet is sculpted, that is part of the chest, so you're not getting any head movement there, but both shoulders do rotate all the way around. And then at the legs, they come straight forward. And without forcing the issue, this is about how far back you're going to get them to go. If you try and bend it all the way back, straight back, you're going to start to push that joint out. As for accessories, he does come with a blaster. And for the sculpting, it's pretty darn close to how that original one looked. There are some very subtle differences here. Well, I should say one not so subtle difference is that this is all black, where the original was pretty much blue. But aside from that, at the back end, that little round piece there is a little bit smaller on this release. And for the handle and the little part that sticks down in front of that, the edges are a little more rounded and not as squared off as they were on the original release. Also, this is the same sculpt of a weapon that you got with the Tarkin release for the Escape the Death Star board game, but the black of this one is more flat, whereas Tarkin's has a little more gloss to it. Now, certainly as you see, the weapon fits in his right hand, but it is a very loose fit. It's really just balancing there. Any movement of the figure and the blaster's just going to fall right out. So that's unfortunate that it just doesn't hold on to this blaster so well. Overall though, for a retro figure being done to look like the original, I think Hasbro did a really good job with this. Certainly I wish the white blended together a little bit better, but for the most part, I think you kind of have to look for that. It's not overly noticeable. And not having the original Stormtrooper, I'm certainly glad that I now have one to add into my collection. And as expected, as I've said with all the other figures in this retro collection line, he fits in well with the other figures that were released, well, really for the entire Star Wars line. They didn't change the mold of this figure going forward. And that wraps up this look at the retro collection Stormtrooper and the current line as a whole. As I've mentioned in other videos, I really hope Hasbro does continue with this sculpting of those original figures from the 70s. I've been enjoying this. I know there's some older figures, most of them, that I'd love to get my hands on. So definitely I'd like to know what your thoughts are out there. And as always, thank you for watching.